So today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the relationship between motivation and delegation, and how to get the most out of our members. I based this workshop on TJ Sullivan's book, Motivating the Middle. So I'm very always thrilled to talk about this subject and use TJ's work to share regarding kind of his ideas about how organizations work. I've been following TJ since I started in the profession. He just retired officially a couple weeks ago from being a public speaker, so that makes me sad. But at least we have his book to continue his legacy, and then all the hundreds of student affairs professionals and Greek advisors like myself that use his work. So the relationship between motivation and delegation. So I like to start out this presentation with this quote by Ian Fleming. For those who don't know who Ian Fleming is the creator of James Bond. A horse is dangerous at both ends and uncomfortable in the middle. I'll let you just think about that for a second. It'll make a little bit more sense as we go through the program. Right. So the premise of this idea is that every college student organization has thirds, right? I'm sure at this point you've heard about this before, all right? The idea that an organization has top third members, middle third members, and bottom third members. That's kind of what we're going to talk about today. And how do we look at each of these groups of members and kind of have a better understanding of them so that we can better focus our time as leaders in our organization to get the most out of our organization. So the first person we're going to talk about here is your top third member, right? Your top third member is the person who always has an opinion about the chapter's direction, exerts his or her influence and social capital. The success or failure of the chapter reflects on him or her personally, right? It's something that they take very personally because they're so active. They stay up late at night with brothers discussing the problems in the chapter. They participate in every chapter event, program, meeting, table, fundraiser, right? You get the idea. It's that person who's always there. When you think about your organization, when you think about your chapter, this is the person's face you see in your mind, right? And other people see in their minds. So that top third member that kind of represents the organization. Your bottom third member, on the other hand, right, I'm sure we can all picture that person in our minds too, right? This person seems like they don't care about the chapter sometimes, or they're not even around to show you whether they care or not. You don't know where they're at, right? It might be somebody who behaves poorly, or does things that reflect poorly on the chapter. They don't pay their dues, or if they do, they never do it on time. They don't show up to anything. Unless it's the fun stuff, right? The person who doesn't even necessarily make all the meetings, but they are always at the socials on Thursday night, right? The person who might even criticize the chapter, even though they're the one of the ones who's not contributing to anything positively to it. They create drama within the organization. They have a terrible attitude, right? Basically, the person who doesn't do anything but always has a lot to say, probably negative about the chapter, right? I always like to point out the special note at the bottom that it's important to not take this person's attitude and actions personally. There might be outside factors that cause them to become a bottom third member. I don't like making excuses for people, but we're all human at the end of the day too. So it's also important to think about the fact that there might be a reason why this person kind of took a step back, is not really doing things, is not involved, right? The first thing you always want to do with your members before coming to conclusions is having a conversation with them. If this is a person you've already had conversations with, you know what's going on with them, or at least what they're telling you, and then they're still not living up to their end of the bargain, then you have to have a conversation with them. The person that we're really going to focus in on is that forgotten third, which is the members in the middle. We always focus on the people that are doing the wonderful things that represent our chapter really well. And we always focus on the people on the bottom because we like to complain about them not participating, doing anything, getting in trouble, et cetera, et cetera. But we very rarely actually talk about the 80% of the chapter that is in the middle. The members who, more times than not are there, they're participating, they're active participants, right? They do contribute to the chapter. Some might be louder than others, some might be quiet, but they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, right? Those are those individuals. So my example here is the person who shows up most of the time, has a positive attitude, wants to contribute, is thought of favorably by most of the chapter, may not be really seen as a chapter leader. As I said, they're not really that top third, but they might be close to there. They might be a committee person, right? They might participate in chapter projects and always do a good job. It might be someone who wants to really be involved but struggles with time commitment. Chapter is a priority, but it's always not number one. Does not seek praise, responsibility, or attention. Does not offer a ton of opinions and doesn't criticize. Like is involved in some of the fun stuff, but is also involved in the important stuff. Avoids conflict and drama. But at the end of the day, would rather have a supporting role, gain the benefits of membership without all the responsibility. I would venture to guess that is about 80% of your chapter. That is the bulk of your chapter. That is just normal. Whether it's a fraternity, sorority, a student organization, an organization you're part of after you graduate, right? This is just human nature. Most people are going to fall into this category. All right. So regardless of where a member of your chapter falls in this concept of thirds, that person's there for a reason. I make this point, right? Because if we get rid of all the bottom third members, then some of those people who are in the middle third then become the bottom third members. You know what I mean? I don't think we need to be kicking these people out of the chapter. I think there's actually a way that they bring benefit to the organization where they can still remain active, but we work with them a little bit closer without spending too much time on, focusing on what they are doing or not doing, okay? So this is not to say that bottom third members are somehow less than or we should kick them out of our organizations, but again, it's important to think about where these people fall on the spectrum so that we understand better how to work with them. So the other thing I'll say is if you're here right now, you're probably one of those top third members. These programs are not mandatory. There's about 15 to 20 of you that are on this program right now. If you're watching this probably because you either want to, you feel an obligation to, you want to be a better leader. So for whatever reason you're here, you're here. So chances are you fall into that top third. So congratulations to you. That's the assumption that I'm making here today if you're participating in this. But that's important to think about. Typically, it is the top third members who come to these things, right? So often I'm preaching to the choir when I do a lot of these programs, but it's important that you take this energy and this information that we're gathering and this knowledge that we're gaining through these programs and conversations and bringing them to the rest of your chapter. So an important concept as we move forward is thinking about the fact that you can spend your time wishing everyone would join the top third, right? That would be awesome. If everyone was as energized as we are, if everyone could put in as much time and energy as we did, and cared as much about the chapter as we do, right? We often feel like that when we're in the top third. But the reality is that's just not realistic, okay? So you can spend all your time wishing that everyone would join that top third, or you can start strategically dealing with people where they are, right? Meeting them where they're at. Can't stress enough how important that is in terms of leadership. The single biggest mistake that we make when it comes to motivation and fighting apathy is thinking that all of our members will respond to the same things that motivate us. We spend a lot of time in our organizations coming up with ways to get people to want to do things. Chances are, if we're one of those top third members, we intrinsically want to do things because we want to improve our chapters. We want to make our organizations the best they can, right? But unfortunately, that's not going to motivate a lot of our members. Quite frankly, it's not. And again, that's okay. Not everyone has to think the way that we do. For a lot of our members, we might need incentives, right? And I'm sure a lot of our fraternities and sororities and student organizations have incentives in order to get members to participate in things. Again, that's fine, right? I had incentives with Greek Council last week to get people to participate in the speaker. That's fine, right? As long as we get them in the room, okay? So again, it's important to realize when it comes to our members that there's going to be different things that motivate different people. We wish it was one size fits all, Doesn't matter if you have a 5-person organization or you have a 100-person organization. We're gonna have to think of different ways that motivate different people, right? It makes more work for us, but unfortunately, right, that's the reality of the situation. And leadership is really about understanding the situation and being situational in our leadership to be able to motivate different people in different ways. So, I mean, thinking about this, for example, top third members like praise and awards, right? The reality is we do, right? We do like that praise. We do like awards. We create elaborate recognition programs. We feel a sense of duty and obligation to our organization. We're amazed when others don't feel as strongly, right? We plead, we lecture, we guilt our members because we take it so personally. Again, that's a reflection of those top third members. So let's motivate your members in a way that matches their needs and their roles in the group's hierarchy. And I don't use hierarchy in any way that shows there's power over anyone else. I'm just saying in terms of that top third, middle third, and bottom third, right? We need to think about how we can motivate people in each of those areas. So here's some examples. Ask their opinion, but don't ask them to do anything else. Start off the conversation with, I want to pick your brain if you have some time. Don't worry, I'm not going to ask you to take on any responsibilities. I just value your opinion. I use that as an example because I think that's a good way of, showing a conversation where I'm asking for somebody's direct involvement, but it's very little involvement. I'm not asking them to take on responsibility, but I am asking their opinion. So they feel an investment in the organization. They feel like their opinion is valued, but I'm not asking them to do some elaborate project, right? So I provided here a few just random examples of how you can think about this. So here's another one. Nothing stresses out that middle third member facing midterms like the prospect of a long drawn out meeting, right? Sometimes we got those chapter meetings that go for 2 or 3 hours at the end of the semester. Start and end your meetings on time, right? When I do my time management workshops, when I do my running effective meeting workshops, I always include this. Start and end your meetings on time. Make it a near religious leadership commitment. By beginning and ending on time, you earn the trust of those middle third members and you support their needs to juggle priorities. Chances are, right, again, if you're a top third member, you're probably juggling 100 priorities. The middle third members are also juggling a lot of priorities. So in order to earn their trust, in order to earn their respect, in order for them to feel like you get them, right, you want to do stuff like this that gets them to say, okay, the leaders of our organization understand that we all don't have a ton of time. They told us our meeting's gonna be 1 hour. Right at the 60-minute mark, we're allowed to turn off our Zoom and go. That's the end of it, right? There's something about that actually shows our members like, okay, they get it. They don't want to draw this out. And something so simple as that can be really helpful. So that also forces you in that situation to really organize your meetings and make sure you have very effective meetings without them going off on tangents and being able to keep it nice and concise. Right. Giving them a meaningful supporting role, right? So maybe they'll never want to be the treasurer of your chapter, but the treasurer could really use some assistance. Would you be willing to step in for a few days and help them get caught up on a project or something like that, right? So it gets them involved, but they don't have a direct leadership role. So that middle member strategy, like a presidential candidate who's playing to independent voters, you have to play the middle if you want change to happen in your organization. Identify a particular issue in the chapter and then target the habits, behaviors, or opinions of those who fall in the middle of that particular problem, right? Again, this is kind of thinking strategically about how we interact with our members to try to build kind of consensus and to utilize those middle members to our advantage because they are 80% of our organization. Right? Not trying to focus on the opinions of the top third or the bottom third. Focus on that middle. So here's an example. So let's say your chapter would like to boost its cumulative GPA. You could certainly take the approach of demanding all brothers sit for study hours 3 nights a week with fines and threats for anyone who does not comply. That's something I used to see a lot. I think most of our organizations have realized that that doesn't necessarily work, which I'm glad that most of you have realized that does not work, right? You know, if we focus so much on building a system that doesn't work for everyone and only works for a few people, right? I don't know about you, but I could never sit in the library and study for 3 hours. So the whole study hours thing and signing in the book in the library would never work for me. I would end up being on my phone or talking to my fraternity brother sitting next to me. So again, we need to think about this stuff. I think we come up with solutions as kind of a Band-Aid and we think we're doing something, but it doesn't really have the intended outcome. So we could do that, or you can make a list of all brothers in descending order with those with the best grades at the top, and then draw a line dividing the list into thirds, right? This is, again, an example, just a simple exercise. Conventional wisdom would say focus on that bottom third. Don't do that, right? If you want to create cultural change in your chapter and build a value around higher grades, focus on that middle third. Right? Don't focus on the people who have the 3.5 and above, and don't focus on the people who have a 2.0 and below, right? Focus on the people that are really in that middle, who are on the cusp of doing well. They're not failing, but they're also not getting straight A's, right? It's that group in the middle that's going to be really able to elevate their GPAs. Now, I'm not saying the person who, has the 1.2 GPA, you should ignore them, because that's not right either. What I'm saying is, if we want to create a change for our overall organization, we need to think about where we're putting our energy. Do I think you should put things in place for those members who have the 1.2 GPA? Absolutely. We should figure out why their GPA is so low. Chances are there's an underlying reason. Let's help that brother out and figure that out so they can get their GPA up. But chances are that person's never going to bring a GPA up all the way to a 3.5, right? So a brother with a 1.2 GPA is unlikely to pull a 3.0 next semester, but a brother with a 2.6, given encouragement, incentives, and assistance, might. So that's what we're kind of talking about here. All right. So it's, again, looking out for everyone. As I said, you don't want to forget people, but when you're thinking of overall chapter-wide change, you have to focus on what is actually tangible, right? We're not going to get all of our members who are failing to all of a sudden become straight A students tomorrow, right? That's all we're saying. Second example, your chapter would like to increase attendance at meetings. Rather than threatening the bottom third members who hate coming to meetings, or asking the top third members who always come to meetings, what you should do, start finding out what changes you can make to make meetings more exciting for the middle members who attend 3 out of 4 meetings. Should we change the time? Do we need to keep meetings shorter? Do we need to introduce more substantive topics, right? How are we actually running our meetings? How are we making them engaging for our members, right? So you need to focus on that middle group, right? Identify those individuals, have some conversations with them, and figure out where to go from there. So what about that bottom third? Do we just ignore them and let them get away with contributing less to the organization, right? So here's where this might be a little bit controversial. I told you a moment ago, don't just forget about people, because I don't think that's right either. But to a certain degree, we focus so much on our energy as leaders of our organizations on those troublemakers in our organization, that people aren't showing up to things, right? So that's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about how they are academically or emotionally or things like that. We should always care for our members. But when it comes to things with them contributing and stuff like that, should we just ignore them? The answer is yes, pretty much, right? So let me explain this, right? So it comes down to a matter of purpose. Your mission as the leader of your chapter is to advance the mission of the organization, to serve your members, to move things forward, and to leave the organization stronger than when you found it. You don't accomplish this by spending all of your time servicing those who demonstrate weak commitment, who engage in harmful behavior, or who disrespect the organization and its leadership, period, right? So we need to think about that. So about that bottom third, here's what we propose. Set minimum standards for membership. Basically, what is the lowest level of involvement you can tolerate from a member? This does two things. I'm going to explain this in a moment, right? When you set different levels of membership standards for your organization. So first of all, you might be thinking set different standards of membership. Like most of our members, this is what we expect of you. But for you 5 people over here, we're going to expect less of you, and this is what our expectations of. Some of you might not want to do that, and I understand if you don't want to do that. And a lot of your headquarters actually might push back on that idea. But the reality is that we set some sometimes very difficult standards for certain people. I think our standards as fraternities and sororities should be extremely high. So I appreciate that aspect. But at the same time, the average person is not like you or I. We're not those top third members. So we often find ourselves in positions where we have those bottom third members who kind of straggle along for 2 or 3 semesters, might not pay their dues, who might not come to meetings. For some reason, they haven't been removed from the organization, but how much have we actually had conversations with them to kind of put a plan in place for them to know what they need to do in order to remain a member, or they're going to get kicked out, right? We try to use our standards and judicial boards as much as possible. Sometimes they don't operate the way that we hope they would, so here's an idea to kind of implement to think about this. So again, setting minimum standards for membership. So here's an example. TJ Sullivan likes to refer to this as the good enough member, right? So the good enough member, right? So here's standards for basic membership. You have to show up to 75% of your meetings. You have to pay your dues on time. You at least participate in one big event in some capacity. You keep a GPA of 2.5 or better, and you at least recommend 1 new member per year. That's all you have to do. If you do that, right, we'll leave you alone. Do these 5 things, don't cause any problems, and we will leave you alone, right? I think this sets up a reasonable expectation for some of our members who kind of seem like they're floating away, right? We often have seniors who, we call it senioritis, but what if we implemented this good enough member with some of our seniors who seem to have senioritis, right? Again, if you do these 5 things, don't cause any problems, we'll leave you alone. But it's important because we still need your dues. You still need to at least show up, right? Do the basic things of membership. Basic. Right? But if you break this contract, we can show this to you, we can bring you up to standards, and we can remove you as a member. Right? Something to think about. It's helpful. I'm not saying you should do this or have to do this, but again, it gets you thinking about how you look at standards for our members. In fact, I mentioned the seniors. I'm a big proponent of having different standards for seniors. Reason being is the person that you are as a first-year student when you join, you're a very different person as a senior who's applying to grad school, who's taking the GRE, who's applying for jobs, right? You're just very different people. That 4-year time period, you change as a person, right? Your priorities are going to change. So I think as a fraternity or sorority, we need to start looking at how we can match our standards for membership with the priorities of our members. We need to match our programming with the priorities of our members, right? So again, if I'm working with seniors who have an internship, who are doing X, Y, and Z in a professional capacity, that I maybe wouldn't mind them missing some meetings. But if you're a sophomore who's not there yet, that person should come to 100% of meetings, right? It's not about paying your dues, because I don't want it to turn into that, but it's about understanding different levels of priorities and supporting our members in different ways. One size does not fit all. Yes, this is a lot to manage, but again, I'm just throwing out ideas. Okay. So the one thing I will mention that's important if you do this, right, is that this list should almost be embarrassing. As a top member, you will look at this list and you will get annoyed. You won't understand why someone would be a member of the chapter if this is all they want to do. In order for this to work, however, you will have to be willing to remove members who fail to even meet this embarrassingly small criteria. No guilt, no drama. Don't talk badly about the guy who meets the criteria. Just leave them alone. Focus all your energy where improvements can be made. period. It's the only way this works. Okay. So now back to the top third. Allowing for disparity in membership expectations might make your top third members angry and annoyed. They will say it's not fair. They might wonder why members who put in very little get to attend the social events or ride in the homecoming float or get access to the same benefits as they. We get it. You will try to elevate the rewards. You will give them lots of praise and appreciation. But hey, they might still get annoyed, right? Again, things you might have to deal with. But a message to those top third members. The idea that every member of an organization will be equally committed and engaged is a fantasy. And you are wasting your time whining about it. I hate to be so blunt, but that's the reality, right? Especially if you're looking at an organization that has close to 100 members. You're going to have a huge spectrum of people who care so much. This is their entire life. I love my sorority. It's the best thing ever. And the people who are like, yeah, I think I'll make it to the meeting on Sunday, So this is just the reality of life, okay? This is unavoidable. You will see this in your job and other aspects of your life too. In a healthy organization, the hardest working members get extra benefits like self-satisfaction, deeper relationships and experiences, a sense of contribution that far outweighs what the less committed members experience. Work hard to make your top third feel valued, but also be certain they understand the natural dynamics of any organization. It's never going to be fair, and we have to get beyond that. We have to commit to excellence even when those around us are not. Again, we have to commit to excellence even when those around us do not. Skip that part. So here's the book for which I pulled this from. This is a very short book. I think you can get it on Amazon for like $10. When I say a short book, you can read this in one afternoon. It's not a thick book in any way. I think what I just went over, it kind of gives a very brief synopsis of his ideas, but that's the credits. So I got you thinking about motivation a little bit and how we think about our members from a structural standpoint. But I also want you to think from a leadership standpoint. How do you delegate as a leader in your organization? Right? If you're the president, if you're an officer, if you lead a committee, right? You're head of a project or a program that's coming up. You're gonna have to delegate, right? Often the people that are leading these things are top third members. Something that's the top third members do, like myself, is we like to put all the weight on our shoulders. So as much as we want to delegate and have a whole team around us to do the work, we tend to do it all of ourselves, right? So let's talk about that. So now that we have a basic understanding of how to motivate our members, we can better delegate and know that they will have a better invested interest in getting that work done. So why is delegating important? So I kind of broke it down into three very basic things. One, delegating helps prevent burnout. We can't do everything ourselves, period. We don't have the time and energy to do it. As much as we want to do it ourselves, we can't do it. It distributes the workload so more can be accomplished, right? We think we can get everything done, but even if we did, it's not going to be 100%. So nobody here is Superman or Superwoman. So let's make sure that we delegate so we can distribute that workload and get more done. And then it allows members to be more involved. Often as leaders, this is something we're all responsibility for. Often as leaders, we all complain that not enough people are involved in our organizations. But then when we have opportunities to involve members, we tend to put so much of that work on ourselves instead of involving them. So here's another example. Allow members to be more involved. Delegate to them. Get them involved in the project, right? It is our roles as leaders to lead, not to do. That's one of the hardest transitions I had when I was a student leader. I am so used to being a doer. I'm the guy who showed up first thing in the morning for the service projects. I love just being a part of it. So when I transitioned into my first leadership positions when I was younger, the fact that my role was to get other people to do the work and for me not to do the work as much, to get other people to do it, I was like, but I want to get the shovel and start digging. You know what I mean? Like, it's just really hard to get away from that. But that's the important thing about leadership. It's about leading, not about necessarily doing. We show them the way, but then we hand it over to them. So why are we terrible at delegating, right? As I said, we are perfectionists. right? We think that, we want things to go our way. We want to do it our way. We're perfectionists. If we want something to be done right, we got to do it ourselves. We believe passing on work detracts from our own importance. Let's be honest. A lot of us do that. I've definitely been guilty of that before too. If I'm not the one who's directly involved, somebody else gets thanked for the project. In the back of my mind, I'm like, hey, that was kind of my idea. We get upset about it. It's silly. It's silly. We shouldn't. We need to get past that. We think it's our job to do it, right? If you are the recruitment chair for your chapter, your job is not to be the best recruiter in your chapter. In fact, you can be a horrible recruiter and be recruitment chair. And I stand by that statement, because your job is to lead the recruitment team, lead your chapter through recruitment. If you're good at that, that's what's important. You could be terrible at talking to new people for all I care, but you need to be the leader of that recruitment committee, of your chapter in recruitment. That's what your role is. It's not your job to do the thing. It's your job to lead others to do the thing, right? Why are we terrible at delegating? When we do delegate, it does not get done. I find that is often used as an excuse, right? We did delegate, but then, I told them to do this and they didn't do it. So, delegating never works out for me, so I'm just going to do it myself, right? I'm going to get to that part in a second. And it's just easier to do it myself. Why am I going to tell someone else to do this? I can just get it done right now, right? So when we do delegate, it does not get done. I'm going to talk about that momentarily, right? So all these excuses, let it go. Yes, cheesy, but you need to let it go, right? You need to let go of these excuses. We need to just delegate. We need to motivate our members around whatever it is we're working on, get them excited. We need to lead, not do. All right, so considerations. Do not rely too heavily on your top third. They're probably already doing enough. The middle should be your target audience when we're talking about delegating here. You can't motivate someone to do something they don't want to do, so make sure those you're delegating things to, those who actually want to do the specific work involved. So I mentioned here, when we do delegate, it does not get done. One of the reasons for that might be that they don't care about that project. I'm sure if you have an organization who cares about certain things, you can find folks that care about whatever it is that project is you're doing. So make sure when you're delegating, you delegate to the right people, right? Rather than forcing work on someone, learn what each member's interests are and then ask if they'd be interested in a particular task related to that interest. I know that most of your organizations already do that, and that's how you kind of structure committees. That's perfect, right? You want to know what people are actually interested in before you put them, if I hate finances, I don't care about numbers and money, and you put me on the finance committee, I'm going to be like I don't care. I'm not doing that, right? So not a good place for me to be. So you need to think about those things. Discuss and agree upon a due date and expectations. One of the biggest failures of delegating is we tell someone to do something, we ask someone to do something, but we don't provide expectations for that project. We don't give them a due date for that project. And that way, that's why it doesn't get done, because you didn't tell me it needed to get done by Thursday night. I was going to do it, but I didn't get to it yet, right? So you need to provide those specifics. Can you do this? Can you do it by Friday? Here are the expectations. Is that feasible? That's how you delegate, right? Provide the necessary resources. Again, when we delegate, it does not get done. Did that person you delegated to have the resources to get that project done? Again, if you tell someone or ask someone to do something, but they don't know how to do it, or they don't have the supplies, or they don't have the knowledge, then why are you asking that person to do it, right? Again, it's delegating with the knowledge of what people's interests and expertise are. The last thing to consider here is accountability. If I ask you to do something and ask if you can get it done by next Friday, I'm going to check in with you on Monday, and I'm going to check in with you on Wednesday. I'm not going to wait until Friday when I ask for you to get it done to say, hey, did you get this done, right? Accountability, right? This is where leadership comes in too. You need to check in with those folks just to say, hey, Just wanted to check in with you on this project. How's it going? Are you still set for Friday? Do you have any questions for me? Is there anything that you need for me to get this done? Again, it's making sure they have those necessary knowledge and resources, right? That's it, right? Simple. And we also need to think about why delegating often fails again. We did not communicate clearly what it was that we needed to get done. The member wasn't interested. They didn't have the appropriate skills. They didn't have enough time, right? We talked about resources. And the member wasn't really given the authority for the task, right? So if I ask someone to do something, but then they don't even have access to Osprey Hub, the administrative, like how are they going to do that, right? So often delegation fails, not because of the person we delegated to, but very often because of the way we have delegated. So we need to think about how we delegate, how our leadership operates, and it's a good reflective piece for ourselves to better move forward in motivating our members, but also delegating out to those members as well. So that was a lot of information.